Hey everyone, welcome back to Christians and Culture, and we're continuing this week with the theme of tolerance. What does it mean to be tolerant? Tolerance really is a Christian virtue, but the tolerance that we see as it's preached by the world is really not the same kind of tolerance as we're supposed to have in Scripture. And we're going to look at it in a couple different angles over the next coming weeks, but I want to start off here by looking at tolerance as it relates to the world. How are we supposed to tolerate the world? And by the world, I'm specifically aiming at the people of the world here. I'm not aiming at ideologies. I'm not aiming at gatherings of moral sin. We're not talking about like the abortion industry or LGBT like groups. We're not talking about the larger conglomerate type things. We're talking about individuals, regular people like you and me, people who are themselves lost like we once were. We have a calling to react differently to people in different situations. And for Christians, that can be hard because most of the time, our reaction, especially here in America, our reaction tends to be motivated politically. We tend to make our decisions based on our politics, not on our religion. It's wrong. It's not how we're supposed to do it. We should be reacting biblically to things, but because of the nature of our discourse, we tend to react politically to things. And this can lead to some really big problems. Often when we get into conflict with people who we would consider sinners or worldly, our goal is not to bring them to the cross. Our goal is to bring them to their knees. And not in a good way. I mean, bring them to their knees as in have victory over them. We want to beat them. You're against me, and so I want to have victory over you. That tends to be our interaction with them. But that's not really the biblical way of reaching the lost. We have a few verses to go through here today. I want to go through them quickly so we don't have terribly long of a video. This will probably be a couple weeks to dwell on this particular topic. But first, we're going to go to 1 Corinthians 5, and I believe we had this verse last week as well, but I just want to point something out real quick. Starting in verse 9, I wrote to you in my letter not to associate with sexually immoral people, not at all meaning the sexually immoral of this world, or the greedy and swindlers or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. Now, we'll get into the further part of that verse later when we talk about tolerance within the church, because it's a very different type of tolerance we're supposed to have. But here, Paul is making clear he never wanted the Christians in Corinth to stop hanging out or being around with sinners. That wasn't the point when he was writing to them, telling them to keep away from the sexually immoral people. Because if they were going to do that, then how would they ever reach the lost? If you're supposed to never be around sin and never be around the sinner, how do you reach the sinner? You can't. You have to go to them at some point. You have to be near them. And unfortunately, in Christians today, we can tend to get kind of cliquish in the way we act. We start only ever being around Christians. We start only ever going to Christian events. We start only ever doing Christian things. And certainly, there's a difference between, being around someone who's a sinner and engaging in their sinful act. I'm certainly not saying that we're supposed to engage with their sinful act. If someone is going to strip clubs and you're trying to reach them, you don't go to the strip club with them. But because they go to the strip club, that's not a reason for you not to try to reach them. You're still called to reach them. Christ did not come for the righteous. He came for the sinner. In fact, that's what our second verse here, our second reading will talk about. In Matthew 9, after Jesus calls Matthew, in verse 10, he's with him at the house, and the Pharisees are getting upset because there's a bunch of tax collectors and sinners there. And we read, starting in verse 10, and Jesus reclined at table in the house. And as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? But how many times have you heard this kind of talk within Christian circles? Why are you hanging out with those people who are sinners? Why are you around them? You're supposed to be a Christian, and you're being seen with people who don't have a great reputation. And don't get me wrong, and there should be limits to our interaction. If people see us with drunkards going into the bar with them, that's probably not a good look. It doesn't matter how abstaining you were going to be in the bar, how clean you were going to be there. That's not a good look. But you should never let the fact that someone has a moral failing keep you from being around them. We are called differently in our interaction with them. We're called differently with our interaction with the world. We're called to love them. Continuing on, verse 12, but when he, that is Jesus, heard it, he said, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus didn't come to fix the people who are already fixed. He came to fix the people who needed him. And in the same way, we were given the command to carry on that task as Christians. We were not called to get on the lifeboat and then close the door, not let anyone else on. No, you're part of the world. You got to stay over there in the sinking ship. That's not our calling. Our calling is to reach as many people as we can, and that means we have to go to the people who are not Christians. We have to go to the people who are struggling with sin. We have to befriend them. We have to reach out in love. Love is what it's all about. Luke 6, starting in verse 27, this is Jesus speaking again, one of the more powerful sections of Scripture. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from the one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others would do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners, to get back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great. And you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. That last line should put everything into perspective for us when it comes to tolerance. We need to meet the world the same way God met us, with love and mercy. How different would the story have been if Jesus had come with a sword to cut off those who were unrighteous, to cut off those who were in need of saving, telling them, you aren't good enough, and so you have to stay away from me. But so often we Christians do that these days. Oh, you're into drugs. We don't really want you to be around us. Oh, we know you're kind of a drunkard. We don't really want you around us. Oh, we know that you engage in this kind of lifestyle. We don't really want you around us. What if Jesus had that same attitude? In John 8, when Jesus is at the Mount of Olives and he went to the temple and he was teaching, and suddenly the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And look at how Jesus reacts to her, and ask yourself, do you react the same way when you're confronted with someone who needs tolerance and love, not a sword? John 8, starting in verse 4. They said to him, Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? This they said to test him, that they might have some charges to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. Now it's not known exactly what Jesus wrote here. He could have been writing the law out. He could have been writing, some people think he might have been writing their sins out. It's not clear. But either way, Jesus obviously had the right answer for what the woman needed. And once more he bent down and wrote in the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones, and Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. And Jesus stood up and said to her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said, Neither do I condemn you. Go, and from now on sin no more. Now, like I said, this is going to be a multiple week thing. We can't go over everything that revolves around tolerance in one brief episode. Next week I want to talk about love and what it means to love someone. Love does not tell someone who's on fire that it's fine that they're on fire. Sometimes love has to be harsh. Sometimes love has to be a little biting, because sometimes someone is heading towards destruction and they need to know the path they're on leads to a bad end. But our main goal when we interact with the world, when we interact with sinners, those who are not Christians, should be by default love. It should be our desire to reach them as if they are us. As if they are us when we were without God. When we were without salvation. In the same way we needed someone to reach out and grab us and pull us to the cross, we need to reach out and grab them. Too often we let ourselves get pulled into the political side of things. We get into fights with people because they have this worldview, and it's a political worldview nowadays. Everything's political nowadays, and we want to win the argument. We want to beat them. We want to show our side's better. It doesn't really matter if our side's better in that respect. Our goal should never be to win the argument and lose the soul. Our goal should be to reach the person who's lost, to bring them in love towards God. Now, next week we'll talk a little bit about what it means to bring someone in love towards God. It's not just simply nodding your head and saying, I accept everything about you and everything you say. That's not love, and we'll get into that next week. But I hope you take a moment to think about your interactions with those who are lost today. Do you look at someone who's not a Christian and think to yourself, I shouldn't be around them. I shouldn't associate with them. I should stay far away. If you do, ask yourself what would have happened if Christ did the same. Would you be standing in a salvific place today? Would you be looking towards to eternity with hope in your heart? I know I wouldn't. Thankfully, he came down in love. We need to do the same. That's all we have here for today. We'll talk a little bit more next week about love and tolerance and continue on with this theme. But hopefully this helps you in your walk and encourages you in your day-to-day. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.